Game theory, a branch of math where math by itself is not that useful.
Because the math is usually not useful, like really not useful. You'll study all the math of the prisoner's dilemma, it's not gonna help you win games.
Because we deal with things that are way beyond what's easily computable.
Despite its universal existence, it can be as hard as finding a needle in a haystack. So it can be computationally intractable.
It's a study on games, strategies, decision making that might make you want to lose a game on purpose to win a different, bigger game. It's also a study on equilibria, trust, incentive structures, systems, rules, local optima and global optima, about possible states and actions, about the knowledge that I have about you knowing what I know about you. It's also about composing a winning deck of cards and then playing these cards as best as you can. Am I going too fast? The whole thing sounds kind of like a study of real life. Game theory is about winning a game of life and smaller games that life consists of. We study smaller, easier, simpler games to understand and discover underlying principles that govern games in general. And everything is a game pretty much. Politics is a game, education is a game, work is a game, family is a game, a night out with friends is a game, a sport is a game, e-sport is a game, dating is a game. And now it got interesting. And now we're talking. In one book I read that game theory is when you say I love you, they say I love you too, and then you both wonder what did the other person mean by this. Like, of course we love each other, but what does that mean? That's a good question. Sounds like a fun game to play. But today, I'm not teaching you how to win dating. We're talking about all these games in general, about life. Because why would you think that life differs from an MMORPG game on a sufficiently abstract level is the same thing? You have your role, strengths and weaknesses, objectives, main quests, side quests, you get experience, develop your skill tree, learn new things, you get help and help others, right? There are activities that you can do to kill time, just watch the time go by as you get older. Sometimes you do PvP, sometimes you want to, sometimes you have to, sometimes it's the right thing to do. The main difference with life is that you don't get respawns. That sucks, I'm not gonna lie, but like, life is complicated and I'm sorry the game is hard. I'm sorry it takes a long time to beat.
I'm sorry the game is hard. I'm sorry the game takes a really long time to beat.
At a sufficiently abstract level, it's the same thing. So welcome to life. Welcome to a game. Welcome to game theory. And I'm not here to give you like a well-structured Wikipedia article or like a lecture at university, like, hello class, today, game theory. There are multiple kinds of games, there are simultaneous move, sequential move games, cooperative, non-cooperative games, finite, infinite games, zero-sum, not zero-sum games, because you'd fall asleep, or even worse, click away. Don't do that here. You got me, that's the game I play, and I wanna be good, I wanna win. So I propose we embark on a journey. We'll go through some fun, simple examples to build that understanding from the ground up until we eventually reach real life. Because I want you to start thinking about life in terms of game theory. That's why I love learning like this, because I get very precise vocabulary to describe complex phenomena in real life. And we break complex games into smaller games until we like figure out life, world. One disclaimer, because I don't approach the game theory too strictly, it's like an amateur take on game theory, because I didn't study it for like years and years. But there are a few requirements that stem from this mathematical formalism that are worth mentioning. First is that we assume that every player, for simplicity, is as smart as we are, which is not the case in reality. And second is that we assume that every player wants to win, which is not the case in reality. You ever look at some people and you're like, okay, they don't plan on winning, do they? Right? And there are things like, you know, I'm letting my girlfriend win because I love her so much. And it's like, okay, man, good for you. But these are the complicated cases where people play multiple games at once and it's just like a pure mess. So of course we simplify it and discover the principles, and then we apply the reality filter that not everyone behaves rationally. Actually, we'll even talk about how irrationality might be useful sometimes. But be patient, you'll see. For now, let's begin the lesson. The meeting with a friend. I'll tell you some fun stories, you'll learn something. It's like a win-win kind of thing. In the beginning, I'd like us to understand why do we play casual games? Why should we study them? Why should we care? And my favorite tool for answering this type of questions is just looking at how the game works already. And we can observe that even animals play casual games, completely for fun, which makes it clear that it gives them some kind of competitive advantage. So let's go back in time and look at evolution. What could be the first casual game? I mean, I can imagine a self-replicating organism just playing with themselves, like playing with their food or like pushing a rock for fun. But let's focus on only multiplayer games, okay? And these were probably just simple, instinctive, social games that we played with our partners at the beginning and then in larger groups. Things like grooming, then chasing each other, then hide and seek, or like, how about I try to bite you and you try to not let me bite you? What do you say?
Under the female's watchful eyes, she can practice her stalking, pouncing, and fighting skills.
It's like testing the physicality, getting to know your body, playing with physics, and just trying stuff like on the playground that makes you learn without risking death at every step, which is pretty nice.
All the lionesses have their own cubs, who will be both playmates and future allies.
I was so happy when I found this footage. This is exactly what I mean. Playmates, future allies, training. Because these fun bite games prepare you for real, dangerous bite games.
Killing a buffalo is a risky business.
When I first watched animal documentaries, it was fascinating to me how often predators and prey coexist near each other, just maintaining eye contact and neither running away nor engaging.
Sometimes these standoffs can last for days.
They travel together for days until something happens. It's a complicated mind war game where big healthy buffaloes are quite safe, but they gotta protect the young ones. And wolves constantly look for weak spots. How else would you call it if not a game? A dangerous game, but a game. So animals have always had these games that prepare them for their reality. Games about mobility, speed, bonding games, because having relationships, of course, gives you a competitive advantage. Birds have these mating dances, or whatever that is. Really? Does that impress anyone? Okay, I'm laughing now, but of course, as a bird, I would totally fall for it. That's probably the worst part. Just like as a human, I fell for... Okay, forget I said anything. The thing is that these were the simple, primitive, animalistic games. But then humans come in onto the scene. Much more complicated lives, social dynamics, culture with art and poetry, governing structures of 1,000 people and beyond. When conditions stops being just survive and reproduce, we get new things like try not to be a social outcast, try to win wars with complex supply chains and manpower management, entrenchments, armor, cavalry, things like trebuchet. How do you organize and manage a trebuchet? How do you aim with a trebuchet? Rabbits never had these problems. Rabbits jump all life, and their games involve jumping. That's it. We needed more complex games that would prepare us for our complex reality. So we came up with simple board games that will maybe teach you some strategical thinking, like battle simulation called chess. But it's so oversimplified, so abstract that it's nothing like reality. But things improved over time. And modern game theory begins in the times where we stopped treating playing casual games like a leisure, fun, abstract activity as a hobby, and we started deliberately constructing games to help us win real-life games, like war, unsurprisingly. Prussia, a country that later formed Germany, in early 19th century got beaten up by Napoleon.
Sent the Prussians running, and Napoleon carried out a ruthless pursuit of his fleeing enemy, taking Berlin and within a single month decimating the Prussian forces.
And they were seeking revenge. Desperate times call for desperate measures. So they came up with Prussian education system that unfortunately got adapted all around the world because it was focused on discipline and obedience. It's completely terrible now, we've all been to school, but 200 years ago it worked pretty well as a spawner of ideal soldiers that will follow every order. And the same people who revolutionized the education system needed a way to train strategic warfare to educate their future officers. And they came up with Kriegsspiel. It was a tabletop battle simulator that could, through simplifying it a little, be considered a breakthrough in the field of studying games. Today we have different Kriegsspiels, like one of my favorite games, Europa Universalis 4. Oh, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. Why do they all leave the coalition? Am I too strong now? It's a Kriegsspiel generals from the past wish they had. But with original Kriegsspiel, studying games went from intellectual hobby for the privileged few to a national focus. It's not chess or checkers or tic-tac-toe anymore that have nothing to do with reality. And so with Prussia, significant resources on a wider, greater scale have been devoted to studying games and revolutionizing education. I was reading recently Annotated Turing, and I was reading how even Alan Turing was using German words, German fonts, how he was visiting Germany, talking to German scientists. Like, German culture was pretty much a spawner of pioneering scientists. You maybe heard of Einstein. He was raised in that culture. I mean, he hated school. It reminded him of army drills, but still, he had opportunity to study his stuff and talk to great people. This culture really fostered scientific growth of all sorts. These people made game theory as we know it. When conditions change, games change, times change, the plan remains. Win. As simple as that. Let's study some games. I want to make a few things very clear at the beginning, so you know what to expect. I want to make some space in your brain because, oh boy, we'll be needing some space. We will be studying games. Games consist of rules, states, actions, and objectives that I like to call win conditions. Of course, it's oversimplified because there's like a player that has a state, also can make actions that influence the state and everything, but I want to simplify it as much as I can. The important thing to realize here is how everything depends on the rules of the game. Pretty much objectives are determined by the rules, states are determined by the rules, actions also are dependent on the rules, end states, let's say, because like you cannot take every action in every state. I just want you to keep in mind the importance of rules. Now I will look at my script to see what chapters are ahead of us, and first we'll be talking about Equilibria. And for Equilibria, you can think of a game of like a system that can be stable. You'll get to know what is an equilibrium precisely later on, don't worry about it. But for now, just think of a game of like a system that can be stable, meaning that we can easily predict what happens next. And these equilibria depend on the rules of the game. That's why it's important to keep them in mind, that rules determine everything. Then we talk about good irrationality, and irrationality is when there are actions that you can take that lead you to objectives, of course, but you don't do them. Like, it's generally bad, but sometimes it can be good, and we're all being irrational sometimes, not necessarily consensually. So that's interesting, we'll talk about this. Then we have elements of dominant strategy, and that's a useful thinking framework that I came up with that simplifies complex games down into manageable elements that you can follow, so you know what to do even if you feel overwhelmed or like you don't know what to focus on. Then we have mechanism design, and that's a study on how to come up with good rules for the game, how to construct games well to get a desirable result. Because as you can see, I emphasize the importance of rules. You can see how everything depends on the rules. Rules determine everything. So we'll study this. Then we have incentives, and incentives are my favorite. Let's go back here. Incentives are like a derivative of objectives. Incentives here, and let's say that they are derivatives of objectives with respect to actions, because we want to know what actions to take to maximize the reward function, to win. That's kind of like reverse engineering the reward function, and it's a thing known for other fields, like in machine learning. Bear with me, guys, bear with me. Game theory made me draw parallels you guys wouldn't believe. In machine learning, we have forward pass and backward pass, also known as backpropagation. So let's say we have a simple neural network, and forward pass is just going in this direction, meaning like what outputs will I get from this neural network? From neural network to the output. But backpropagation is going in reverse direction to figure out how to change neural network to get a desirable result. In robotics, you have kinematics and inverse kinematics. For an armed robot, kinematics will be what will be the endpoint of a robot if we set these angles. If we configure the robot in this way, where will be the endpoint? But inverse kinematics is how to configure a robot, what angles to set here and here and here, so the endpoint is exactly where we want it to be. Now, I don't have to explain all this, but I want you to deeply understand what an incentive is and what dots I connect here on my daily basis. So in games, we can speak of the same terms. Forward pass in a game would be what happens when I do this action. What state the game will be in if I do this action. But really, what determines how we behave is the backward pass, the incentives, meaning what actions should we take, how we should change our behavior, change our strategy to win, to get a desired result, how we should change the weights to get a desired output, how to configure the arm to get a desired endpoint. So you can move however you want, but if you want to win, you follow the incentives. If you're in a race, you're incentivized to be fast, no matter what. You eat healthier, you want to be lightweight yet strong. It's like, it's non-negotiable if you want to win. Now, of course, you don't have to win every game. Okay, we got incentives out of the way for now. So these were the basics, but then we'll talk about some useful concepts, dangers, fallacies that every player should be aware of. Things like anarchy, information cascades, recursion. And these things will help you determine what games are not worth playing. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's go with Equilibria. Equilibria. John Nash proved mathematically that every finite game has at least one equilibrium. Now, they are hard to compute and find, we just know they exist. Equilibrium is when no player would change their strategy knowing the strategy of other players. So if two of us play and I see your strategy, you see my strategy, and we're like, fine, we're not changing it, then that's an equilibrium. Now there's a different term here, and that's a dominant equilibrium, a special case where there exists a strategy that beats every other strategy. We'll talk about it later, just remember the terms for now. Equilibrium and dominant strategy. Rock, paper, scissors. We all know the game. Is there an equilibrium here? There is, and it's two players playing at random, assuming they are conscious about the choices, because there's no strategy that can improve their situation. You cannot be like, oh, I'm super smart, I will play more rock, because your opponent will notice and they will play more paper. But that's the equilibrium assuming optimal play, because the game is constructed to be random. Equilibrium depends on the rules. Now, is there a dominant strategy? No, because theoretically you can always do better knowing the strategy of your opponent. I mean, maybe they're not playing optimally, maybe it's not random play, maybe they're really bad at the game and they really play more rock, or only rock. Normally you would play at random, but seeing what they're doing, you'll be playing only paper. So if we care about what our opponents are doing, it's not a dominant strategy. Now let's go to a different game, the most widely known game theory game, Prisoner's Dilemma. Now, even if you know it already, I don't think most people realize the significance of it. So let's speedrun the rules. Very simple game, Prisoner's Dilemma. Two players, both having two options, in total 4 scenarios, with different rewards in each of them. We won't bother with the whole background story, how the prisoners are being interrogated and stuff. They just want to maximize the reward, and they can betray or cooperate with each other. So let's analyze the game from perspective of player A. This is us. So let's analyze all scenarios. Assuming player B betrays us, we are in this column, and optimal for us is to betray them as well. That will lead to a better result for us. But assuming they are nice to us and they will cooperate, it's still optimal for us to betray them. Now, they have the same reasoning. They will do exactly the same thing. That means that we will end up here. We will end up both betraying each other when we could be here. If only we could communicate and trust each other. And so that scenario not only is an equilibrium, it's a dominant equilibrium, because no matter what they're doing, we don't care about that. If time comes for us to make a decision, we betray them, because we're smart. Too bad we're ending up worse than we could have. It's not a made-up game. It's a simplification down to a minimum of a phenomena that is observable everywhere around us. What Prisoner's Dilemma means is that when acting rationally, optimally, strategically, rationally, even if we analyzed every scenario, every action that we can take, every action that our opponents can take, and if we picked the best possible option, we might end up worse than we could have. How can we possibly prevent this from happening in real life when we cannot analyze every scenario? Another question, what does the equilibrium depend on? I said it earlier, the equilibrium depends on rules of the game. That's where we get mechanism design, a study on how to construct games well, so the equilibria are in good spots. It invokes so many thoughts in me. Prisoner's Dilemma can be summarized by don't hate the players, hate the game. Some games are just terribly constructed, and no matter what you do, you lose. It gets you thinking about what games you could play, which games you should play, which games are you forced to play, and what can you do about it. You know, I was always fighting for my freedom, and I still do, but it evolved and matured into the greatest type of freedom is being free to choose what limits your freedom. In other words, the highest privilege is being free to pick your games. Pick your equilibria, pick your incentives, pick what you play for, pick who you play with. And it's an honor to be playing the game with you guys. Like, we're in this together. That's what's on my mind when I think about Prisoner's Dilemma. I think you should know by now how significant the game theory is. Like, It's a whole philosophy, kind of. It has a lot to do with philosophy. Now we'll be moving from oversimplified games to more complex ones. There is this real-life prisoner's dilemma example that explains why stores are built next to each other instead of being nicely spread out.
Why is it that I can drive for a mile without finding a coffee shop and then stumble across 3 on the same corner? Why do grocery stores, auto repair shops, and restaurants always seem to exist in groups instead of being spread evenly throughout a community?
Imagine we have a beach with 2 ice cream carts. Global optimum is this setup where customers don't have to walk far and each cart owner gets roughly half of the customers for themselves. Of course, assuming that the distance to the cart is the main factor in customers' decision strategy, which is often true in a real-life game.
Game theorists consider this a socially optimal solution. It minimizes the maximum number of steps any visitor must take in order to reach an ice cream cart.
But then, what prevents the other guy from moving slightly closer and getting more customers? But you know it, and you can do the same thing. That's why 2 of you being close to each other in the middle of the beach, where nobody can do anything to improve their position, is the equilibrium. No dominant strategy, just this equilibrium with 2 carts in the middle. But some customers have to walk twice the distance, so it might be not worth for them. That's the anarchy, that's the selfish case where everyone acts by themselves. Now we get rules and laws and contracts that try to counter that. I will talk about mechanism design later. I heard that in the whole European Union, there are laws restricting where pharmacies can be built, so they are not too close to each other. But then in the news I heard about someone who wanted to build a pharmacy and there was a need for the pharmacy, but they cannot build it because of the law. Just notice the complexity here. Moving on. Suppose there are 3 countries, equally as strong, and they fight, they want to win, they're in a war. So they are equally as strong, so each of them have roughly 33% chance of winning. But they can form alliances. So, for example, red and green could form an alliance to attack blue together, and then, after blue is gone, have 50% chance of winning. That's a pretty good option. But then, what prevents green from not going full force on blue, just letting red tire themselves out a bit, that will spend more resources, and they are easier to attack later on. Then they will not be equally as strong, maybe they'll have like 60 or 70% chance of winning. But like, red knows this, they are equally as smart, so they'll do the same thing. So we end up in a funny equilibrium where they form an alliance, they declare that they will attack blue together, and then not doing anything. Just standing with their armies on the border here, everyone has their army ready and nobody's engaging. Like, bro, we had an alliance, right? We attack blue. Yes, of course we attack blue. Okay, I declare war. You declare war? Yes, I declared war. We're engaging, right? Yes, we're engaging full force. Bro, I'm engaging, of course, but like, they have a fierce defense. Are you even trying? This is nicely called signaling, because you signal to everyone that yes, you fully support the cause of attacking blue, but can someone else spend resources on it? Just not me. Just please not me. But that was an oversimplified game. Of course, it doesn't happen in real world that we have exactly 3 equal countries, but there don't have to be. The incentives are exactly the same, and this is exactly what happens in real world. You know, I'm Polish, and World War II started with German invasion on Poland. And in our culture, we kinda still make fun of what happened back then, how we were left out by our allies. What happened?
The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, "I want that thing," and the Allies would say, "You can't have that thing." "Okay, you can have that thing, but no more." "I want that thing." And repeat. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace, and we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler.
They broke some treaties, nobody could stand up to them, but they couldn't take Poland peacefully. We had alliances. We had alliances with France and the United Kingdom. We were safe, right? right? Historical documents show that official plan of Polish army back then assumed a significant relief on our German border from the Allies. Great plan. Yo, great plan. Yet that did not happen. We call it the phony war.
On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then came a period known as the phony war, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. And they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically.
Because it was optimal for them to publicly support Poland and say, yo, we got you. We have alliances, we have treaties. But then Germany called their bluff, and unfortunately, they were right. They must have studied game theory. Poland was like, yo, we're dying out here. Soon we'll be done for. It's GG, we have no more response. And allies were like, yeah, we could do something, but like, if we attack them, they will attack us back. Really? But of course, you cannot blame them for following their best interest. That's how the game works. If there's no entity to enforce the treaties, that's how the game works. Everyone is on their own. It was war for them to not do anything. These are not terrible players, it's a terrible game. And the same thing is happening with Ukraine now, if you see what's happening. West wants to punish Russia, but like, can someone else punish them? Not us, we struggle with our economy. Maybe some rich guy? And the United States are helping Ukraine, but not because of their golden heart, but because it's optimal for them to deal a blow to Russia without any American life lost. And it's not necessarily war for them to end the war as fast as possible, but they want to spend the least amount of resources possible to kind of make Ukraine survive but tire Russia out at the same time. Now question, is NATO really that strong? Would they help us? I mean, of course, we have a treaty. That's an alliance. Now, it would be nice if you could trust somebody, but trust is more of an exception than a rule. Assume that everybody just maximizes their reward function. Your role as a game theorist is just discovering what their reward function is. In the past, people made vows, for example. Vows kinda change the game, change the reward function. If allies made a vow to defend Poland, it would change the game for them because they risk breaking a vow. We could talk about how marriages change the game for everyone involved. We could talk about how to set up a game so that the only way to win, to maximize your reward function, is just being a productive beast that conquers the world or whatever else you want. For now, I'm just saying that allies would defend Poland only if there was something they valued more than the potential manpower and materialistic losses, like their values of defending the weak or whatever else. Last thing in this chapter about prisoner's dilemma is that in sociology, in terms of sociology, we could call the situation with alliances a diffusion of responsibility, because everyone should help Poland, so it doesn't have to be me. And a related term from economy this time is tragedy of the commons, where something is public and then it's worth to exploit it. Like oceans are public, so it's worth for everyone to catch as many fish as possible, because if they won't do it, someone else will. That's how we end up in an equilibrium where we hurt the ecosystem. These are just different perspectives on the same issue. Collective responsibility is just prisoner's dilemma in a multiplayer game where it's worth for everyone individually to do nothing, but by doing nothing, everyone loses. That's where irrationality comes in, that fixes some of these bad equilibria. Actually, it makes sense now to talk about irrationality and selfishness. Good irrationality. Can it be good even? I would define rationality in game theory sense as following your best known strategy. In that sense, procrastination is irrational because you know you should be doing something else, but you're not doing it. You have access to your optimal policy at all times. You just choose not to follow it. You can literally access it by asking, what should I be doing right now? You want to win or not? Scrolling social media for hours is not a winning strategy, I'm gonna tell you that. So irrationality is usually not desirable, but surprisingly, it's useful more often than we would assume. Prisoner's Dilemma showed us that irrational cooperation may lead to better results than acting rationally. So how do we stimulate the good irrationality effect for benefit of everyone? The evolutionary answer is this thing called emotions. Think about an angry customer leaving a negative review of a product that he bought and someone catching a thief that stole someone's wallet on the street. What these situations have in common is involuntary selflessness. The guy leaving a negative review of the product isn't motivated by anything that makes sense. He doesn't want to help everyone because he's so nice. I mean, usually he's just angry and wants to express the anger. He made a mistake already and there's not much he can do about it. I mean, he can return it if there's a return policy. Okay, just go on with the scenario. My goodness. He couldn't return it this time. But his anger helps everyone. I mean, sometimes the reviews are baseless or just straight up false, but in general, bad products will make customers angry and good products will make customers happy. Can we agree on this? The same is for tackling the thief. It makes no sense for you individually. Coming back to the World War II situation from earlier, the irrationality is not even if France or UK helped Poland. The irrationality is kind of like if Turkey went full force to defend Poland because you cannot kill innocent people. And it's like, wow, it makes so little sense for you to do this. But thanks. Perhaps each of us individually would be better off being the kind of person who can always make a detached, calculated decision in their own best interest, not willing to lose time fuming over a sunk cost, let alone lose a tooth over a wallet. But all of us are better off living in a society in which such defiant stands are common. And when I was first reading it, I was like, wow. It's a hard topic for me, guys, because I'm the reject emotions and embrace strategical thinking kind of guy. But I think that's beauty, that's harmony, that some people are more irrational and some less. I would never leave a review of a product, neither positive or negative. It's just like, why would anyone care about my opinion? Why would I spend time on this? I also don't punish people for treating me badly. I mean, unless they insist of making my life worse, but usually it's just like the worst I can do to someone is leave. And wow, what a punishment. I mean, it is a punishment. It just doesn't do justice. I mean, immediate justice. I just love my peace of mind and I'm often overloaded with information. I'm an overthinking. I just like everything I would do is just cut, focus, prioritize. I'm never mad. I'm just disappointed. It's like we were friends and that's how you treat me. Come on, man. And apparently it's kind of selfish. That's tough. I mean, I understand. I mean, I know that what's optimal for the whole society is me going, listen, you cannot treat people like this, do you understand? But like, that's being rude to them, and being nice to them, meaning not punishing them, is selfish. In that sense, it is, but like the word selfish has the negative tint to it, and it still feels like the right thing to do here. Like, that's who I am. Okay, I think the main lesson here is we are different and that's a good thing. That's harmony. That we have cold tacticians and expressive fighters. That gets me thinking about harmony. Like, we need each other. We're a team. It gets me thinking about conservatives and progressives. How beautiful it is that conservatives generally oppose changes and they stick to what worked historically. And then there are progressives who are often wrong because they explore new weird ways of doing stuff, but from time to time they find something so good that is being adapted by the whole society. It's like a dynamics of society evolving and changing, and I think that's beautiful. I was reading this book on chronotypes, The Power of When. I have it here. The Power of When. It was a book on chronotypes, meaning different types of people and their chronorhythms, and it described how much sense it makes that there is 20% of people that are early risers and they prepare the whole society for the day. Then there's 50% of people that are like normal risers, or like the average, the main workforce that the whole society is adapted to. Then there's 20% of evening types, but for teenagers and young adults is the majority that finish off the day, but they all collectively extend the alertness period of the whole society. And then at the end, there's remaining 10% of insomniacs that are somewhat alert the whole night. I mean, it might suck now when we have cities and homes and usually there's no dangers waiting for us during the night, but you can still appreciate the harmony, the beauty here. Okay, I think that's enough of irrationality and harmony. Now, a new take on dominance strategies, because I want to share a thinking framework, because I'm nice and kind, and you have to know this. I will make you. Dominance strategies, just to remind you, are the strategies that beat every other strategy no matter what the circumstances are, meaning no matter what the opponents are doing. But that feels irrelevant for real life and other complex games, because like we cannot find equilibria, let alone dominant strategies and dominant equilibria. For example, for chess, we are convinced that with perfect play, the game ends in a draw. But what is the perfect play? We have no idea.
First of all, the games will generally not have dominant strategies. In fact, dominant strategies are pretty rare.
They are rare, okay. But I came up with a thinking framework that will get us closer to an answer, like an intuitive estimate. We might never know a dominant strategy for a complex game. Like for real life, it's even hard to establish win conditions. It's so complex. But let's break it down. Think about elements of dominant strategy. Things that with high probability are a subset of dominant strategy. Or elements that have like a vibe of dominance to them. Like getting competent. I don't know much, but I know that getting as competent as possible will get me closer to winning. It will help me discover the rules of the game, like through studying science and biology, physics, all this stuff. This will get me closer to winning. Maybe I'll discover win conditions one day. Elements of dominant strategy. It's such a cool concept and nobody's talking like this on the whole internet. I searched for it. I mean, yes, we can just call it universally good things to do, but keeping it in terms of game theory will stimulate different parts of your brain. Like, it will just get you thinking about traps you might fall into, about equilibria, about possible states and possible actions, about incentive structures, win conditions, and all this stuff. You know what I thought of to my machine learning people out there? Following elements of dominant strategy as compared to following dominant strategy is like performing a backpropagation on a neural network on batches of data instead of full data. Yes, you introduce some noise to the direction you're going in, but you will end up where you want to end up much quicker with much less compute. Let's get to examples, shall we? Stronghold Crusader. A castle builder's strategy game. Don't worry, you don't have to know this. I just want to visualize my points, my thinking, and analyze the game for the perspective of elements of dominant strategy. And I set up a scenario here where I'm the human in the corner, surrounded by 7 bots. Pretty strong bots, wolves. And pretty much my point here is that in games there's a lot of noise. Ton of noise. Everyone will tell you different things. You're overwhelmed. You don't know what to do. And I want you to understand that details do not matter. They matter for this specific scenario, but that's not what we're after. We want to figure out how the game works. We want to be thrown in a different scenario, completely scenario, new environment, and still know what to do and what to focus on. And details do not matter. Whether I will build a wall here, here, or here, or here, it does not matter. Whether I focus on like building macemen, or pikemen, or swordsmen, or spearmen, or assassins, or Arabian swordsmen, it does not matter. That's not what the game is about. These units differ, they have different strengths and weaknesses, that's fine, but that's not what the game is about. You can have like, what do you prefer? Have a lot of weak units or a few strong units? It's like, it does not matter essentially in this particular game. If you figure out how the game works, it's just about making an army, and you need resources for this. And pretty much the game is for resources. So I win not by having assassins over Arabian swordsmen because they are stronger and something. No. I win when I have more resources. And that simplifies my thinking, my strategy. Like, look at bots. Bots have stone here, iron ore here, more stone, more iron. Practically, I will only defend this land, and the game becomes how to get the most amount of value from this little land that I can practically defend. And they will of course have more resources than me. They have like, I mean, there's 7 of them. I have like, resource wise I have no chance, but still I maximize my chances of winning through maximizing the value I get from the land. And you know, we study simplified games to figure out life and how everything works, but we can also go in kind of reverse direction and look at what's happening in real world to kind of win these games, these smaller games. Because on a greater scale, this is what countries do in the real world. They have resources and they want to use them to the best of their abilities. And what is happening? There's many countries that have a lot of land and agriculture or like natural resources, and they just sell them. And that's like an easy way, because you can just have land, you farm the land, extract resources, sell it, and you make a living. But not everyone is that privileged. It's a tough position to be, so most countries without resources aren't doing great, but there are exceptions, like Japan. Okay, I have to stop this because look what I found. Countries with the least natural resources. And there are some small city countries like Vatican City, it doesn't matter, but the bigger countries, they are banger countries because they had it hard. Japan is one of the most technologically advanced countries because they didn't have much choice. They had to somehow make value out of either someone else's resources or their scarce resources. I mean, they also fought wars for these resources, and that's understandable, but let's not focus on this. They literally face the same problem we face here. I mean, I'm dying here, don't worry about it. But this is what they faced. We don't have a lot of stuff compared to our enemies or other people, like there's no comparison, but we have to do it somehow. How to maximize the value out of what we have. So I will take inspiration from them and use their strategy here in this game. I will not extract resources and then sell them. I will process the resources, I will make the most amount of value possible from this. And that's what I focused on. I focused on wheat farms that I can process into flour, then bake into bread, and then I sell bread. I don't sell wheat. I don't sell wood. I get the wood, I make crossbows out of it, and then I sell these crossbows because they are worth much more than just wood. I have to put additional work into this, and that's fine because work is not scarce. The scarce are resources. I care about resources here. That's how you maximize the value out of what you have to maximize your chances of winning. Other details do not matter here because we don't want to overfit for details in this scenario. We want to discover patterns because we cannot focus on details here. We don't have the compute or time to like figure out what is the best possible option in this specific scenario. No, because now we're getting thrown into a different scenario. 1v1 where opponent has all these resources, all this grass, you have nothing. You have a tiny bit of grass here and some iron ore. How do you win this? Did you remember all the details, where to put tower and walls and something, some units? It does not apply here. You know what applies? Elements of Dominance strategy focus on the resources. And yes, you can win this scenario alone on like not even getting wood. You can buy wood, make crossbows out of it, sell crossbows, and then have money for all your army to win this scenario. And maybe you're like, oh, that's obvious. Of course you have to have money to make your army. But like, life works the same way. Like, what are the elements of dominance strategy? What makes you win in real life? That's what you focus on. But yes, this is how my elements of dominance strategy work. These are these patterns that are true regardless of what's happening, that you can build your whole strategy around. And you can analyze every game like this, like League of Legends. We all know the game. There's so much noise. That's what I want you to understand. How much noise there is. How different people will tell you different stuff. How advice is outdated after 2 weeks' time. And people focus on these details to overfit for every little like noise signal. And people somehow care about this noise. Like, what changed this patch? Rune tier list, item tier list, champion tier list, something tier list, builds from Korea. How is meta shifting? It's a never-ending game because in a month, the meta will be different. It will be outdated. If you ask me, where will the game be in 3 years' time? It's like, I have no idea. Not even game developers know it. But there are things that will be true regardless of what's happening. These are the things that we can say with high probability that these are the things that were true for the past 10 years. And that's what you focus on if you want to be good at League of Legends. Like, you just go back to the game basics. Ever since the game was made, you always want to have more gold than your opponent, more experience points, and more vision to make better moves on the map and know where the enemies are. That's it. I mean, there are probably more things to it, but you build your strategy around that. Master the basics. You need to know when to freeze the lane, when to crash the lane, how to last it well, where is the timing to back to the base for items, when is the timing to place a ward. But at least we know now what to focus on, what to prioritize, what is worth our time. Elements of dominance strategy are worth your time. Amidst the chaos, stick to them. They are a way of getting the highest reward to computation ratio. And you could be the best at League of Legends. You could track new builds from Korea, play for hours every day, watch influencers, tutorials, track patch notes. But let's be honest, let's be realistic. You don't want to win just League of Legends. There's so many other games, including real life, that you want to win. And you will not win all this while focusing on details. You don't have the compute. So win with elements of dominance strategy. Mechanism design, finally. Now I want us to look at all this from the perspective of game makers, because players, when they cannot change the rules of the game, they will just kind of like abuse the rules. They will like bend all the little rules for their best advantage. They will just do their best to win. As I said earlier, rules determine everything. So game makers are in this specific spot when they pretty much engineer players' behavior, determine everything. But they do not always realize how important their role is, how much responsibility they bear. In 2012 Olympic badminton tournament, there was a big scandal, big shock. Players were trying to win a tournament according to the rules. How could they? Okay, but they were trying to win a tournament through losing a game.
8 players expelled from the games, not for doping, but for losing on purpose in order to avoid stronger teams in the next round. This is the way elite badminton usually looks. But this is the way America's arch rival, the Chinese top seeds, played, deliberately serving into the net, again and again.
Watching it after 10 years of being played because of my mechanism design class. What a case study it is. The tournament was set up in a way that all future matches were known, but like position-wise, not team-wise. For example, they know for sure that winner of this match wins the loser of the other match, and so on and so on. Fair enough. But there was one team that crushed everyone, just completely outmatched. But for some reason, maybe by mistake, maybe it was like a somewhat planned trick, they lost one match. It was a match that didn't really matter for them because they were split into groups, and from groups you could advance from first place or second place. So for them it didn't really matter that much. They still advanced to the next stage, just from the second place, not from the first. But them losing changed the game for other teams. Because the game was about playing as best as you can, okay, that's obvious. But then for other teams, the game was also about facing the best team as late as possible. With other teams, they can at least compete, they have chances. With them, very slim chances. So, they didn't want to face them, of course. But because they lost that one match, the winner of the other match was facing them next. And yeah, it's weird to watch a game where both teams are trying to lose. Organizers were not happy because it goes against the spirit of the sport. You know, they ultimately disqualified them, and it's like, wow, really? They were not at fault, the game was faulty. I mean, you could argue because they signed a document saying that they will try to win every match. That's fair. As an organizer, I would admit my fault at poorly setting up the rules of the tournament and just let them do it. This is what happens when the game sucks, and a lot of games suck. And we as players try to navigate around that or change the rules of the game whenever possible. But sometimes there's just no hope. The Redwoods of California are some of the oldest and most majestic living things on the planet. From a game theoretic standpoint though, there's something of a tragedy. The only reason they're so tall is that they're trying to be taller than each other, up to the point where the harms of overextension are finally even worse than the harms of getting shaded out. As Richard Dawkins puts it, the canopy can be thought of as an aerial meadow, just like a rolling grassland prayer, but raised on stilts. The canopy is gathering solar energy at much the same rate as a grassland prayer would, but a substantial portion of the energy is wasted by being fed straight into the stilts, which do nothing more useful than loft the meadow high in the air, where it picks up exactly the same harvest of photons as it would, at far lower cost, if it were laid flat on the ground. If the forest could only somehow agree to a kind of truce, the ecosystem could enjoy the photosynthetic bounty without the wood-making arms race wasting it all. But as we've seen, good outcomes in these scenarios tend to only arise in the context of an authority outside the game. Someone changing the payoffs from the top down. It would seem as though in nature then, there's simply no way of establishing good equilibria between individuals. But sometimes there is hope. There is something we can do.
When you're coming onto the board this turn, if you come on to my civilization, I will basically lose this game and destroy you, and only try to destroy you and not try to win anymore.
I might lose the first few games of Small World because I'm doing this.
But eventually people learn that you actually do this. And then they stop coming in on top of you, and now you win, because their choice is to either, if they attack you, they lose too, or don't attack you, letting you win.
So in repeat play, you can make credible threats in games. There's a whole mathematical theory around threats.
This only works if you play the game more than once.
This guy pretty much engineered a whole new game for himself that makes him win. We could also talk about law, how government tries to fix things and shift the equilibria, like with the pharmacies that I mentioned before. We could talk about marriages that do not limit your freedom just for the fun of it, but because it actually changes the game in a beneficial way for some. I just hope you see how interesting mechanism design is and how much sense it makes to change the rules of the game. I was always saying to change the rules of the game. I made a video about it. I was living by it before I even understood how much sense it makes. It's like a whole mission statement that I'm not here to play your funny games. I'm here to make my own games. It's a call for agency, call for being brave enough to fight and stand up against the status quo. think about how you can literally engineer the games you play, engineer life. Like, I'm a big believer in the idea from what I've learned from his video Willpower is for Losers that I recommend you watch. It's about these log boxes and that there is a big difference between resisting a temptation and not having a temptation. Very big difference because it doesn't drain you out. You don't eat sweets not through resisting it, but by not having them around, not buying them and increasing friction to actually get them.
In the study, the people who were best at self-control and said that they were the type of person who was good at resisting temptations, they actually reported experiencing fewer temptations throughout the study. That is, the diligent people with high self-control apparently were just using less self-control, and found that those exerting more self-control were not more successful in achieving their goals. It was the people who planned their life so that they didn't have to use self-control that were more successful. So the difference between me and successful actor Tom Cruise is that while I'm figuring out how to resist the temptation to play games, he would have just thrown them away. Should I do this or that, or just do this for a little bit and then do that productive thing? A simple way to reduce that uncertainty and indecision and stop being distracted by these choices is to make the choices that you don't want to make harder, or simply delete them. Use less willpower, not more.
When you want to make it easy to go to the gym, you pack your stuff up so it's ready to minimize the friction to actually make the decision, make the commitment. Otherwise, you might go, I'll go to the gym, but I'll have to pack my stuff up and refill the water bottle, the whole thing. Minimize the friction, engineer the game so it's easy to go to the gym and hard not to go. Like, the worst thing you can do is to decide not to eat a cookie and then have it at your arm's reach. Like, I have a cookie and I sniff it. Oh, that's a good cookie. Oh, that's a good... I will not eat it. I decided not to eat it. I will not eat it. And it's like, fine. Like, probably maybe you'll give in. But even if you don't give in, you'll tire yourself to death. You have no energy, no willpower for other things. Maybe more important things. Like, restraining your emotions. It all takes conscious effort. It all takes energy. It all drains you. And that cookie was an analogy, if you got it. By the way, did I start giving you productivity tips in the video about game theory? You guys gotta keep me in check, because if you let me lose, I'ma go wild. Incentives. I hope you remember the term. We've been talking quite a lot about incentives already. Pretty much for every game example, we could analyze, rules, equilibria, dominant strategies, incentives. So I'm just throwing these examples like, just to illustrate my points. But here, I don't want to give you specific examples. I want to talk about real life. Because incentives still have things that were left unsaid. So when I think incentives, I think big. I think cultures. What does your culture incentivize you to do? What do your friends incentivize you to do? How does your parents' approval or disapproval shape your life? These are all interesting concepts from the perspective of psychology and motivation. And I think a lot about this. I think a lot about creating a culture that helps you win, that makes you win. Because our mainstream pop culture doesn't really incentivize you to win life. It incentivizes you to win, but what exactly? It's the wrong game. What does the music you listen to incentivize you to do? I was fascinated recently because I was watching this Polymathers video, and he said that Chinese people know they are overworked and underpaid, but they do not rebel. Why? Because they believe it's the right thing to do to catch up to the West. Wow. They literally made a culture about working hard.
Neither are paid as well as their counterparts across the globe. When even the winners are treated so poorly, one wonders why workers don't complain. What she found in interview after interview is that Chinese programmers are aware of their unusually stressful working conditions. But they situate their personal hardships within a larger context, the nation's development. One engineer said, quote, "If Chinese people worked from 9 to 5 like people in developed countries, we wouldn't have so many accomplishments. Chinese tech workers aren't exploited. They're part of something bigger than themselves."
I mean, Asian cultures have their own problems, of course, but like glorifying hard work and getting good at things is what I respect. And they will catch up to the West. I mean, not all West. Maybe some West. And the matter is quite serious. Like, you can literally shape people's minds by what is a beauty standard, what we find attractive, what we do not find attractive, what is a nice job to do, what is not a nice job to do. You create culture with every action that you take. And that's how you end up with cultures of people who, I'm not kidding, I saw it, support each other's addictions and normalize harmful behavior, and they make fun of it because they just want to have fun. It's like nothing harmful. You can win and still have fun. It's not this type of fun though. You are continuously transformed by everything you experience. All incoming sensory inputs have right access to your mind. You cannot change this no matter how intelligent you believe yourself to be. And it connects to everything. It's like the notion that you are the average of people you spend the most time with. Never downplay how much who you associate with matters. Your social circle is literally a mirror, and if you want it to perfectly reflect you, obsessively handpick people who only see eye to eye with you, but also offer everything more and nothing less. That's literally it. That's my culture. We win. We change the games for the better. We fight, we learn, we build, we go gym. We practice cognitive security. Search that up. Visikan Veresemi even tweeted about how you shouldn't joke about things you don't want to happen. The stuff you joke about, even ironically or whatever, has a way of shaping your reality, so be careful and deliberate with that stuff. A lot of people out here fumbling their bags by joking about outcomes they don't want. You might as well joke about the outcomes you do want. If you surround yourself with people that complain a lot, you will complain more, you will be less happy. If the price of winning is having to be lonely sometimes, I'm taking it. And it's hard sometimes it's very hard. The first 21 years, then it gets way easier. I graduated my engineering studies recently, and I heard someone say that after studying, after 7 semesters, they have no skills, or they don't feel certain in any of the skills. And it's like, wow, really, that's a fact, that skill level among graduates is not even comparable. And the fact that the diploma is the same for everyone, despite the huge skill gap, is not ideal, of course, because there's no way to differentiate them. But this is how the game is constructed. This is how the game works. This is what university and school optimizes for. They don't care about you understanding things. They don't care about you having skills. They care about you passing exams. That's a big problem because people literally waste a lot of time and potential. Like, people follow the path of least friction. And if the game is to pass exams, they will pass exams. But what is the win condition? What is the incentive? People spend so many hours on these reports, on lectures, on everything, all these projects, and they don't have skills at the end. And it's not their fault. Not 100%. The game is just terrible. Group project classes incentivize you to do nothing, just like with the Alliances situation. Can you imagine doing work when others can do it for you? And you cannot blame these people. That's the worst part. The game is just so terrible. The real problem is that we don't want to win university. We don't want to win school. We want to win real life. And school should help in that. But it doesn't. And I'm not judging people individually, because sometimes you don't care about the class, sometimes you care about the class, people have different situations and all this. I'm just saying that we should not tolerate as society terrible games like this, because these are completely made up games. Like, we can change, we made them, we can change them. And I made a whole video on how I changed the game for myself as best as I could. I tried to change win condition from passing exams to learning. We had a class recently about making a presentation, and you couldn't get a satisfying grade just on the presentation. I mean, you could pass it just on the presentation, but for some reason this teacher set up a game where you cannot just make a presentation like in other classes. He wanted you to be active, to ask questions regarding the presentations. What a game. So the teacher still didn't care about learning, about teaching more, learning more, something more. So the game was still about meaningless, arbitrary points that represent nothing, mean nothing, just points. You just have to say anything. Why would you play it? And there were people that asked a question about every single presentation, when normally in every other class it's rare, because you ask a question when you're genuinely interested in the topic. But here they were asking about anything, just absolutely anything for the points. Maybe you cannot blame them for playing the game. I mean, they didn't make the game, of course. But this game was actually optional. And playing along means consent to terrible games. Words cannot express how important it is to prioritize worthy games and fight against the bad ones. Playing along is just, wow, it was optional. I mean, at least it was not the majority, it was just like a few people, at least in this one class. Because you know what I did? I showed up in the first possible term, I made a presentation and never showed up again. I heard the rules, I was like, no, I'll take a lower grade, you guys take care, see ya. And despite this behavior, also in other classes, I got a max grade on my diploma. Not that it matters, I'm just saying that fighting against the game doesn't necessarily lead to losing the game. Because that sounds like a win and a half, if I've ever seen one. Just what games do we play? I know people that are getting competent outside of university and they don't care about university and they have bad grades, and that's completely fine. But focusing on grades rather than getting competent, like at the expense of getting competent, is just a losing strategy. What games do you play? Games determine your behavior, determine what do you do, what rewards you get, what you spend your time on, what you spend your energy on. And you don't have a lot of time and energy to waste. You have to win life, not school. Life is a real game. School is just an arbitrary game we made up. Exercise to the viewer. How do we change an equilibrium to be in a place where every student, when acting optimally, will get more and more competent and capable of fighting for what they believe in, instead of passing exams and not getting competent in the meantime? I remember this valedictorian speech, meaning the best student in the class, about how he regrets focusing on grades.
It felt so good when I heard my name announced with this title. It's so good. For about 15 seconds. 15 seconds of being at the top of the pile of all my accomplishments, and it felt euphoric. But there must come a 16th second. I realized that the stress of this year for this goal in a 5-minute speech was paid for with the lack of attending to relationships in my life.
He makes the point of caring about relationships, how he wishes he spent more time with friends and family and everything, and that's completely fair and valid, but it doesn't have to be this. There's just so many better games than school. It's crazy. I foster my relationships. I also get more competent on a daily basis. Like, I'm here to win life, not school. Sorry, babe, but the only situationship we're gonna be in is marriage. Pick your games wisely. The world literally depends on what we focus on what games we play, on what incentives we follow. The future is ours to build. You can stand up against bad equilibria, bad games, bad cultures that incentivize you to waste your life. We're not done yet. Next topic, anarchy. The Price of Anarchy. Very simple concept and useful to know. It's like a nice expression to know. It's a measure of inefficiency of equilibria. So it's simply a difference between anarchy, meaning the case when everyone acts for themselves, anarchy, versus perfect case, the global optimum. Just like if some godlike entity could steer everyone and tell them what to do to achieve the best result for everyone collectively. In Prisoner's Dilemma, it would simply be the difference between a local optimum, two players betraying each other, and global optimum, two players cooperating with each other. And studying the Price of Anarchy can lead to very interesting results. You can read a lot on Wikipedia, but one of my favorite examples is Brace's paradox.
All drivers taking this same route is an equilibrium because it doesn't make sense for any individual driver to change route. 15 minutes, and that's less than the 17 minutes we had before the Blue Road was cut, and that's Bray's paradox. By removing a short, fast road from a network, you might actually decrease travel time. It's almost like a multiplayer version of the Prisoner's Dilemma.
Multiplayer Prisoner's Dilemma sounds familiar. I think I used the expression when talking about collective responsibility. I think so. But coming back to Brace's paradox, a road could not exist, an investment could not be made, and the travel time would be lower. I mean, isn't that interesting?
And this isn't just an academic curiosity. It's happened in real life. We know that in Seoul and Stuttgart it's happened, where the removal of a road has actually caused travel times to go down without the number of cars on the road going down.
And you can really calculate it mathematically, the price of anarchy, for many games. And here is one paper showing the price of anarchy for different types of games. And you can dive into that, we'll not get into great detail. An interesting fun fact for now is that cars driving on roads and packets traveling through the internet have linear delay functions, meaning that the price of anarchy is 4/3, meaning that the selfish case, the thing we have right now, is only 33% worse than the ideal case. Which might sound like a lot, but for some games, the price of anarchy is infinite.
So in conclusion, Price of Anarchy goes to infinity, as D goes to infinity, and epsilon goes to 0.
So appreciate what you have, but be careful out there. Information cascade is a fun concept because it's very practical for complex PvP games. Games where you have fog of war. Real life is full of fog of war. Information warfare, constant information warfare. What is true, what is not true. It is not chess when you have perfect information about the present state and all the past states. It is a real data battlefield. If you're constantly trying to figure out what is going on exactly, it's generally a good idea to observe what other people are doing, other players. Like, if a restaurant is popular and completely booked up all the time, it's probably a good restaurant. If you see a guy frantically running on the street, it's a good idea to observe what he's doing. Is he running from something towards someone? Like, it's a good idea to be interested in that. In my high school, when I was too lazy to check where I have my next class, it was a good idea to just blindly follow your classmates. Like, wherever they're going, I'm going after them. But it was not always perfect, right? Maybe one time a guy was just going to a toilet and we all followed him there. Okay, or something, I don't know. Crowd can behave very irrationally, and it all should be quite obvious. I remember this one experiment where paid actors were standing up in a waiting room for absolutely no reason.
We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there.
By mistake. Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? What began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room.
So following the crowd is a shortcut of sorts. It's beneficial, but not always, because it can be easily abused by the players or by the game. Because there might be games where it's mathematically rational to follow the crowd, but it's not optimal. It's our favorite prisoner's dilemma, this time stimulated through information warfare, through uncertainty, through blind spots in our knowledge. Imagine a situation where different companies have an auction for rights to oil fields. Now, they are competitors, so they don't share information among themselves. And let's say that we play together. I mean, we are a part of one company, we are a team. So perfect scenario, perfect case for us would be where everyone else was convinced that there's barely any oil in the field, so they will not bid high and we can get the field for cheap, but the field would be the biggest field ever discovered. We would be rich. And prior to the auction, we made a geological survey. We scanned the terrain, we examined it, but the problem is that the survey is not reliable. It's better than nothing, it's some indicator, but we cannot be too sure. So our survey showed that the land that we're gonna have auction over is nothing too interesting, we shouldn't bid high. But this auction is a complex game where we cannot see other competitors' results, their scans, their surveys. We can only see their actions. And their actions are influenced by our actions. But our actions are influenced by their actions. So the auction starts and one company immediately bids high. What are they doing? Like maybe just want to throw us off or something. Maybe they have a good survey and they believe in it. Okay, but second company immediately bids high as well. Maybe they want to just increase the price, make them pay more, just kind of battle with them. I don't know, we don't know their surveys. Then third company jumps in, bids high as well. And then we're here like, wait, our survey showed that the land is not interesting, but it's not reliable. 3 companies are just killing themselves, bidding high and high. We cannot be left out. The field is probably the best field we've ever seen. Trust me on this one, agree with me. We have to bid high. And the more companies join in on this high bidding, the more other companies are inclined to completely disregard information that they have and just follow the crowd. It's an infinite misinformation, an information cascade. It's funny how sometimes having information about other players' behavior can be worse than having no information about others and just following your own instinct, your own information. Uncertain information, but still. These information cascades can quickly go out of control if nobody stops it in time. A book for $23,698,655 plus 93 cents, plus $3.99 shipping if you'd like. Guess the book. Oh, it's just a book about evolutionary biology, about flies. One company was setting the price algorithmically to slightly below their competitor's price, but their competitors were referencing their competitor's price to be significantly higher. This periodic update of the price cascaded up exponentially out of control. And it's a funny example, maybe not of information war, but of basing actions off of other players' actions. The lesson here is that sometimes it's much better to not care about what others are doing and just do what you think is right. And that's a popular phenomenon known for other games. Like poker is based on that, on these mind games of bluffing, deceiving, of information war with others. What do they know? What do I know? It sounds fun and interesting, just it's not always optimal. This recursion is quite common even if there is no information war, even if all players have the same information. Think about a stock market. The value of the stock is not what the stock is worth. It's more like what people think it's worth. No. It's more like what people think that other people think it's worth. No, I think it's deeper than that. I think it's what people think that people think that people think that this stock is worth. There was a famous game, famous example in the past, in like 80s or 90s. 1981. Okay, fair enough. I will not give you the details. There was just like, I'll give you a rough idea. There was a beauty contest. Bear with me. There were like 100 people to pick. You had to pick like 5 people, let's say, and you win if your picks the most resemble the average pick. So you don't pick what do you find or who do you find the most attractive, right? You pick who do you think that other people will find attractive. But they're trying to do the same thing. So like what is going on? How deep do we go? Maybe the final picks have nothing to do with what anyone finds attractive. See, that's the game. That's what makes it interesting. But the rule with the depth of your reasoning of what I think that you think that I think that you think is not to go as deep as you can. No. Because if you analyze the recursion to like, let's say 4 levels, you might spend unnecessarily big amounts of compute. And you get the wrong answer because you base your reasoning off of information that your opponents, other players, do not have. Because there is a point in the chain where you assume that they know that you know, but they do not know. And that leveled reasoning of recursion we call K-level reasoning. And I will explain it, visualize it on the game that is called Guess 2/3 of the Average. The name should be fairly self-explanatory. There's a scale from 0 to 100. You ask some amount of people what will be the 2/3 of the average guess, but if they guess the same thing somewhat correctly on some level, then it changes the average and you should go one level deeper. And we quickly realize what is an equilibrium here. You should know by now, you went through like an amateur fast lane caveman oversimplified course on game theory, if you didn't skip any parts. What is the equilibrium here? 0, of course, because whatever you think the average is, you should go lower than that to win, but everyone knows that, so everyone does it, so you should go even lower and lower and lower until you reach 0. But real life is not even close to this. I will explain what happened in a real experiment in a second, but first let's explain the K levels. As I mentioned, we call it K-level reasoning, and we have K-level 0. In this game, in this particular game, K-level 0 means that someone does not know the rules, doesn't really get what is going on, and they just guess at random, completely at random, just throw a number. So the average guess will be 50 on a scale from 0 to 100. Now, K-level 1 is assuming that everyone else is playing at a level 0. So, if the average will be 50, you guess 33 to win, if you're at a level 1. But then we get to reasoning level 2. And level 2 assumes that everyone else is playing at a level 1. So the average will be 33, making the level 2 guy guess 22. So the equilibrium is 0. But in reality, in the real experiment, I have it written down, in one experiment, the average guess was 31.3, which is really close to level 1, making the correct guess 21, which is close to level 2. And in a different study, completely different demographic, let's say, the average guess was 22, making the correct guess 14, which is perfectly very close to level 2 and level 3. Graph of people's reasoning levels looks roughly like this. Most people stop at level 1 or 2. Now it's up to you to estimate, to figure out how far your opponents will go, how badly they want to win, how smart they are. Guessing people's skill levels becomes a separate kind of game. We're slowly coming to an end. Please notice the cost of strategizing. How expensive it is to constantly guess what they think, what they know, what we don't know, what is going on. In many of these games, we don't even have to be against each other. The basic thing is if you don't want your clients to optimize against you, you'd better optimize for them. If I design an algorithm that already optimizes for you, there's nothing you can do. And this is beautiful. There are games where honesty, where being truthful is the optimal policy. You don't have to strategize, analyze, do K-level reasoning and all this. You are just honest. People are overthinking stuff every day. They're anxious, they're trying to prevent catastrophes, think what can go wrong, analyze everything that's imaginable. I'm naturally an overthinker, and I learned how to live with it. The solution is being honest. That's the best optimal policy. And I love dealing with other anxious people because I know damn too well how to deal with them. Okay, maybe not love, it's demanding, but it's fun. They're often very smart people, very smart, like 5th level reasoning on a daily basis. And just giving them information helps them so much. Just communicating what you feel, what you think. It's like, this is exactly what I think, this is my intentions, this is this, and it leaves no room for speculation. They don't have to think what they think, that they know, that you know, that something. You just know everything. That's all I know. I'm being honest. Don't try to optimize against me, I already optimized for you. Like, listen, I'm going to eat lunch. I'll be gone for a while, so I'll be not responding, okay? I did not get mad easily. I'm just busy. I remember this one situation and the person was grateful. They were really grateful. The other person messages me like, is it okay for me to ask this question? I'm like, if it's not okay, I will tell you. Don't worry, it's fine. That alone stops the whole information cascade suboptimal recursive wars. Being clear with your intentions helps them so much. And that's just one example of a game where honesty is the best policy. There's, for example, a type of auction that is not common, but is proven by game theory to be optimal. That's where honesty is the best policy. But I will not have time to talk about the details. I was on a date with a girl before I even studied any of this game theory, and after some meetings she told me that I don't have to be so clear and direct with my intentions. And I was like I laughed because I like that in myself, but she's right. But that was really funny. I guess I might overdid it sometimes because the small sense of mystery is like fun and romantic, and I was not like brutally honest. Like, I don't even remember what I said, I just remember what she said. But that's a fun lesson, that you want to avoid information cascades where it's costly and not fun, but sometimes it can be fun. Then play it. But that's for a different time. I want to finish off with the final words about game theory from Algorithms to Live By. If changing strategies doesn't help, you can try to change the game. And if that's not possible, you can at least exercise some control over which games you choose to play. The road to hell is paved with intractable recursions, bad equilibria, and information cascades. Seek out games where honesty is the dominant strategy. Then just be yourself. Thanks for watching. I gotta go for now, but I'll catch you later.